Today on episode 564, my friend Starr Sackstein tells her story about when she knew it was time to leave the classroom. And stay tuned at the end of the show for a special message about this topic.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
Today, we're talking with Starr Sackstein. She has been in the classroom. She has been in administration. And now, Starr, you're an education consultant. Of course, you're an author. And we are talking about the fear of leaving. Leaving what, Starr?
Leaving the classroom. When I was making the decision to leave the classroom to go into leadership, I struggled mightily. And I know that when folks found out that I was making that move, people were cautious about it, saying, you're going to the dark side. How are you going to make the same kind of impact as you did when you were in the classroom? And those were huge concerns that I had as well, because as much as I had my struggling or trying days, I loved being a classroom teacher. It was really my heart and soul, and the greatest growth I did as an educator was with the students that I taught. So it is, I think, a big fear for a lot of teachers, especially ones that step up to do leadership roles in the capacity that they're in already. And after being a leader for 2 years, I would say that, it's not an unfounded fear for sure.
Okay, so teachers are afraid of not being as relevant. They're afraid of missing their students. I mean, what are the things that specifically that they're afraid of when they look at leaving?
I think you hit two on the head. But I think part of why we go into education is to be around kids. And I feel like the farther you get from the classroom, the harder it is to feel passionate about the things that you do. And I think that that's a fear that happens as well, that if I leave the classroom, will I still love the work? Will I still see the kids? Will I make as much of an impact? Impact is huge. Of course, part of what people say to get you out of the classroom is that you'll reach more kids because you'll be working with teachers, and that means you'll have access to more kids. But the level of the relationships that you have with kids is certainly not the same as when you have your kids. I imagine, especially if you're working with, younger kids and you're with them all day long.
Okay, so then you swapped over, and some people call it the dark side. I think awesome administrators just make a whole school better, and I'm fortunate that I work with some amazing administrators. But why, is the quote dark side label true? Do you feel like you moved to the dark side?
I do not. If anything, I did everything that I could in the 2 years that I was in my position to shed light on every opportunity to lead as possible. I try to be the leader I always wanted. I made promises to teachers only when I knew I could keep them. I only asked them to do the things I would have done myself. I don't think that I ever put the folks on my team in a position to do things that I didn't believe in. And I did a lot of things behind the scenes to make sure that they weren't inconvenienced more than they needed to be, because let's face it, being a teacher it's such a challenging job to begin with that they shouldn't be burdened. And I think that good leadership makes it so that teachers could really do the job that they want and can do. And our job as leaders is to support each teacher in the way that they need to be supported, the same way that we do with kids, differentiated to make sure, they feel supported.
So what are the negatives about stepping up to lead that teachers need to know are there?
So it is challenging. Depending on the role that you're in. I was the director of humanities. I was responsible for 6 different content areas, K-12. So I didn't teach my own classes. I did work very hard to co-teach with the folks on my team to make sure that I was in classrooms. And that's really important. I think that some of the things you might not be aware of is the difficult conversations come up. There are definitely things, unless, there's always somebody above you, whether it's, central office or other administrators that you have to work with and appear to have a solid front. Whether or not you agree or disagree is irrelevant. You're on a team, so you have to make sure that they're seeing a united front. And that can be challenging at times, especially if your district is going through change or you're trying to implement something new. and the philosophy of the group or the mission of the group doesn't seem clear. You might also be asked to do things that don't feel comfortable or right to you personally, whether it, to make, one thing I've heard in other districts is, sometimes you have to make teachers feel uncomfortable if they aren't fitting well. That's not something I could feel good about. I think that as a group, as leaders, it's really important that we see each individual teacher and try to make them the best version of themselves, not necessarily the version we want them to be, but the one that's going to be best for kids.
Yeah, and that's tough because, don't you think that way too many people have snap opinions about teachers not really founded on knowledge?
I do. And I think that that's part of the challenge as well, is that representing our profession and trying to make sure we get in front of the realities of what's happening in our schools and sharing those stories is also really important. Building up the teachers and the other leaders that we're with is really important so the kids get what they need, because it's really always about the kids.
So you think that tension, okay, this is what I have to do, because there's what you want to do, what you know is right. And then that sometimes things come down and you have to do things that you're like, oh, I don't know that I agree with this, but I have to pretend like I agree.
Yeah, I think that that's the biggest challenge. And to be honest with you, when I was a teacher, I broke a lot of the rules. I'm not going to lie about that. If I didn't agree with something that was going on, I found a loophole so that my administrators got what they needed, but I felt okay about what I was doing. And in leadership, you're one more person removed or one more level removed from being able to find those loopholes, because unfortunately in these systems you become a part of the bureaucracy sometimes if you allow yourself to become that. It's a lot harder to go rogue as a leader than it is as a teacher.
So, Starr, as you look back and you think to teachers that are in the classroom and, they're starting this year, but they're wondering, okay, this is going to be my last, or have an opportunity to move in administration. When is it time to leave the classroom and move into administration?
For me, it was when I wasn't being challenged enough anymore. I think as a lifelong learner, it's really important to make choices where you're always growing in the spaces that you're in. And sometimes we outgrow the positions that we're in, or maybe we outgrow the schools we're in. I think there is a fine line between staying in a position because you're comfortable or afraid of change and making that leap and taking that risk and the worry of it not being as good of a fit as the one that came before. And many times in the last 2 years, folks have said to me, do you remember your first few years of teaching? Was it easy? Did you love it every day? And it's true. I think the bigger challenge is after you've been in a classroom for a long time. I was in the classroom for 16 years, and then you move to leadership, and that new feeling is a weird feeling because you now have this whole body of experience that you're bringing with you. Sometimes a lot of that experience doesn't translate exactly the way it would into another classroom. It translates a little differently.
And face it, there are administrators who are, quote, teachers administrators who get the classroom and know what it's like. And then there's some that are not as relatable and connected to the classroom. That's got to be hard.
It definitely is. And I think too often there isn't enough time requirement. Like I feel like principals and curriculum leaders and higher administrators should be required to be in the classroom longer than 3 years, which is the minimal requirement, I think, to become a teacher, to become a principal, rather.
Yeah. And, it's sad to say, I know a local school district, a couple counties over, that the way they get rid of their not as good teachers is put them in administration and, let them run the buses or let them run this and that. And you're thinking, wow, you're going to have a whole bunch of administrators who don't know how to teach.
Yeah, and that's kind of frightening since our first responsibility is instructional leadership to make sure that the kids are getting what they need.
Okay, so Starr, you've got a lot going on. People can contact you now to help them drive forward a vision for their schools. But I think this is some great and honest, reflective advice for teachers. I appreciate your transparency and openness to talk about this because, these are some of the things that are not talked about that need to be talked about, because so many great teachers, one of the first things people say is, you need to move into admin. And the truth is, it's right for some and not right for others, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think teacher leadership is so important, and it's different than leadership. When you're in a teaching position and you can collaborate with your peers and you could rally the folks that you work with so that kids get the best experience, it's a different angle, but an equally as important, if not more important than leadership by itself.
Okay, great thoughts. Thanks, Starr.
Thanks so much, Vicki.
So this is a very difficult topic, and it's definitely one that I understand. I have totally been there. I have been past burnout. I've had struggles. And I know for me, truthfully, I had decided that I was going to stop teaching at the end of my son's 10th grade year, just because of all the things were going on, and it was just a very difficult time, and for many reasons. But my son is now a senior and I'm still teaching. For me, the right answer was to change schools and have a new administrator and just make some changes that needed to happen. So I just want to encourage you, just because you're struggling right now, there can be great hope on the other side of change. And sometimes you have to stick it out and sometimes you have to get out. But I would just encourage you, there are so many amazing teachers out there and we need you in the profession. So this is a personal thing that we all have to listen to and decide, but we do need to truly examine our situations and ask ourselves hard questions like I had to ask over the last 5 or 6 years myself. It's not easy, but sometimes change is necessary. And I know for me, I'm sure glad I made it.